Miss my cake. I miss my cake. He's the one that looked for us.
That chocolate you used to get.
Yeah, that's the message.
No. Working on it, get back.
All right, everyone, it's officially 5:30, so I'm going to call this regular meeting of the Marion County Board of Education to order. The first item on the agenda is the Pledge of Allegiance and a moment of silence. Attention, salute, pledge. I
pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. The next item on the agenda is item 3, and I need a motion, please.
I'll make a motion to consider approval to amend the agenda, adding time.
I'll second. That's all right. Yeah. So, all in favor? Aye. The next item on the agenda is item 4, communications, and the first there is public comment with Mr. Matthew Mikowski. Is Mr. Mikowski here tonight? Okay, I'm going to assume that Mr. Mikowski is not here this evening. Any of the individuals in the back would like to sign up for public comment? Okay. So moving on to item 4B, unfortunately, Superintendent Schlosser could not join us this evening, and so I'm going to ask Assistant Superintendent Mr. Benningfield to talk to us for just a little bit.
Sure. I feel like the substitute teacher. I talk about retiring a lot in this office, and Mr. Brady always asks me when I retire, will I agree to come back and be a substitute teacher? And I always very quickly say, I'm not sure that that's for me, and then here I am, but I didn't fill out for it. I want to use this moment on our agenda to do something a little different. But before I do, we have a couple announcements I think that we should make. First, I want to show some appreciation for our families who worked with us last week when we had to cancel school for a day. I appreciate everybody's flexibility. We're so very fortunate that we've only had to take one day off this school year. A lot of other districts can't say that right now. And we're like any other business. We're struggling to hire people, keep people, find people, and keep things going. And so our faculty and staff are doing a tremendous job for it. Just like last year, they're going above and beyond the call of duty to fill in, change their day, whatever they have to do to make it work. And they should be commended for that. We could even give them some applause. I was reminded last night how awesome our staff and faculty are when I had the pleasure of interviewing the students who are trying out for student ambassador. Mr. Simpson and I sat on that interview panel, and they spoke so eloquently and fondly of their experience as students in this district, and so easily named teacher after teacher, class after class, that made a difference in their life. And so I appreciate all that they're doing to make this work too. I also want to recognize Mr. Simpson. I found out last night that the Kentucky School Public Relations Association selects about a half a dozen folks from across the state who serve in his role to represent that group, and he is the Region 3 representative for that organization. Congratulations. What I thought maybe we should do, if we can, Since our last board meeting, we lost a member of our family, Mr. Rob Reeder, who wasn't with us a long time, but man, did he ever make a huge impact on our students, on our football team and boosters, and on our faculty. He was dearly loved, and if you had the pleasure of knowing him, he taught and approached life with a huge heart and a lot of passion, and I know that he will be greatly missed. We will miss him indeed. So if we can, let's have just one more moment of silence to remember the contribution he made to this district. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Banfield. So moving on, item 4C is our attendance and enrollment report with Mr. Lyons.
Make sure I get my good side. Okay, so here's our enrollment as it stands today. And can you maybe enlarge that a little bit? My age is starting to show. 233 students, and when you include preschool, is at Calvary. 472, we have at Glasscock, 340, oh, too much. At LES and West Marion, we've got 431. And then middle school and Night Academy are in a dead heat for trying to get to 500 there. We got 496 and 498. And then Marion County High School is 653 with 146 currently at the UC Spalding Marble Academy. So that's where it is. The other listing below is our last normal year, and it's what I've compared it to. The red numbers show negatives, so we're down over 18-19 numbers. And that's basically how we sit right now. Any questions about the enrollment? The next page is our August attendance. So you can see that it is at 94.09 for the month of August, which is below what it was 2 years ago. There is definitely a difference in attendance so far this year. The next slide will show you what it is year to date. And you can see where it was approximately year to date 2 years ago. Each of the schools are struggling with attendance, and most of that, I guess, is the current condition we're under. And then the final page of this report shows a daily attendance, and every one of them is below what it was 2 years ago. We haven't had a green day yet, so it just continues to be an issue. And I know the legislature is meeting on some of this. This is not unique to Marion County. So, any questions on any of that information?
So when the students are out, they're still counted while they're doing their homework.
There is a mechanism for them to be counted in attendance. So this is attendance outside of that. This is not reflecting our quarantines. I mean, this is reflecting our quarantines. They're not included in this number. These are just kids that are not coming to school for various reasons. There was a question, I was asked to have some information about COVID. If it's okay, I will share that with you now. Bring those up. So I prepared a couple of slides here. First, this is our incidence rate. Just scroll that down a little bit. You can see the dates. So I started tracking this in July, hoping I wouldn't have to track this again this year. But you can see a steady increase. We do have a 2-day trend of going down. But of course, you know, Labor Day is that big question mark is sitting out there waiting to see what happens with that. So our highest we've reached so far is 155. Our highest we reached last year was 168. So we haven't hit the top yet. Assuming 168 is the top, you know, but maybe we will start seeing some relief on that soon. The next page, you show our current COVID numbers as of today. So you've got the schools, you've got the total enrollment, the positive count, those are cases. Those are cases of positive students. The exposure are cases of students that have been quarantined, not necessarily ones that we have quarantined. These are all the ones that we report. For every child whose parent calls up and says they were exposed, they have to quarantine, we mark them with code. And a QCE code is what's called. A QCP if they're positive, QCE if they're exposed. Those are all of our QCEs. The impacted is the sum of those two numbers. So that's how many kids are impacted by it. And then, of course, there's a percent of the impacted on it. And like I said, that is today's numbers. And the next one, these are year to date. So QCPs or positives, there have been reported 185. We've had 1,089 exposed students reported. And of those exposed, there are 101 duplicated. So kids that have been exposed more than once and had quarantined more than once. And then I've also put on there that we currently have 1,600 students who are vaccine eligible. They've reached the age where they can get the vaccine, and that would prevent them from being quarantined when they're exposed. The next one, please. This is the flow chart that I masterfully put together last year based on the information that they gave us for how to quarantine, to try to help the teachers and the principals do that. I mean, I know that 1,089, that's not all of our quarantines. We didn't do all of those. But clearly you can see our principals are spending a lot of time, and their staff spending a lot of time on doing quarantines. So they use this, and basically when a positive case is identified, we're to look back 2 days, 48 hours, try to identify anyone who could have been identified as a close contact, someone who was within a 3-foot radius of them if they're wearing masks, 6 feet if they're not, and anyone in that group, we would go down to the yes, if you've identified them, looking basically on contact seating charts, classrooms, lunch, sports, bus, so forth. And then from those close contact lists, what you do is you exclude anyone who's been vaccinated because they don't have to quarantine. And you exclude anyone who was COVID positive in the last 3 months. They also don't have antibodies. So that's basically what they follow. And then if of that list of people that fall still are close contacts, then they are isolated and sent home. They begin their quarantine period with day 1 starting the first date after their exposure. And then we provide them a letter that Lincoln Trail has given us that gives them instructions on how to quarantine. We document them as a QCE and we assign them that QRS code that you were talking about, which provides them the instruction and helps us with our attendance on that. So any questions on how that process is executed in schools?
So if a child in a classroom, you have a teacher who's open. Classroom goes home.
It would depend on the situation. So let's
I
say,
want to understand this one better.
right. So say you're the teacher, and we would look at for adults now, whether you're wearing a mask or not, it's a 6-foot radius. The masks are irrelevant. 3 feet only apply to students. So if you're 6 feet away, which you are from me, I would not be considered close contact unless you spent throughout the day more than 15 minutes within that close contact area. And with elementary, that's very possible. Not so much at the secondary level where they might be teaching from the front of the room or just moving up and down through the room and so forth. So it has to be that 15 minutes exposure during that day in order to be classified as close contact. So that's where the investigative part of this comes in. They interview the teacher, they ask who they were in contact with, how did the day go for the last 2 days that they were in class, and try to piece together any of them. And they cast a very wide net. I mean, we have a lot of exposures, but you just don't know. So you're trying to get as many you want to try to exclude as many as possible, but you also don't want to leave anybody off of it. They're very diligent. The schools are doing a very good job of being diligent, making sure that they cover all the bases, ask all the questions of the students, ask all the questions of the staff, just to help to make sure that they're not overdoing it, but not underdoing it. So, and I'm sure there's been some errors. We've not had a huge spike that looks like it's associated with school, but we really don't know. What children do once they leave, what families do once they leave school, we have no control over. So whether they're exposed anywhere outside, and that's what's leading to the number of cases we're having, we don't know. Or is it because they're in school? There's just not enough data. The new test to stay model that we've implemented, I think that's on the next part. This If it's done with Fidelity, this could help us answer some of those questions because they can only, they quarantine outside the school. They're not allowed to participate in athletics. They don't ride the bus. And this is an optional program. Not everyone has to do this. And people need to understand, we're not going to force anybody to go into this program. But it is a series of 5 tests that they will take. And it's based on the regular quarantine, which is on the right-hand side of that graph there. So if a child is quarantined, they can get out of quarantine after 7 days if they can produce a negative test result. They're asymptomatic for the whole 7 days, and they have a negative test result on day 5, 6, or 7. So if they have a negative test on day 5, 6, or 7, then they can return on day 8, but they still have to do those 7 days of quarantine because the track of the disease, it takes days for that to show up. And so to show up on a test. And so that's why they have to wait that. So what the test to stay does is it will test them on day 1. If they're negative, they can stay at school. On day 2, if they're negative, they can stay at school. On day 3, if they're negative, they stay at school. On day 4, and then on day 5. After day 5, they've hit that 5th day window. Now they still have to quarantine for those other days outside of school, but they don't have to test anymore. Okay, does that make sense? It can be a little confusing. They come to school on day 1, day 2, day 3, day 4, day 5, day 6, day 7. As long as they are negative through those first 5 days, they go through those 7 days. On day 8, they can return to normal operations. They can go back to riding the bus, they can go back to playing in sports, that sort of thing. So that's all done, but it has to still be that 7 day, but there's still this 5 tests. So we've started that on Tuesday. I don't know how many people have opted for that yet, but if people do it with the Fidelity, that is they quarantine them outside the school, then we will start to see how many of those kids, because they could only then have gotten it from school. But if they don't quarantine outside of school, then we still really won't know to what effect spread is occurring in our schools. So it has the potential to give us the data we'd like to see, but we really don't know.
I think that's the important thing to stress is a lot of people didn't understand. If they can go to school, then why is it necessary for them to quarantine after, outside of school? And so that's it right there, so that we can truly determine if they are a school-related positive.
Right, if schools are contributing to spread, then we want to know that because we need to take action to prevent as much spread as possible. And even though in most cases, most cases with students, I've talked to probably 20 parents, and each one that's had a positive case, and I'll ask them, how's your child faring? And they'll usually say a little tired, sense of smell and taste is lost, headache, but just really minor symptoms. That's typical for children. The problem is they come home to adults that are much higher risk. And we have a lot of grandparents that are raising children. So we have parents that are scared, and or guardians who are scared to send their kids to school because they get one exposure and they have to quarantine, and it really spooks them. I've had multiple conversations on that. So that's the reason why they want to continue to quarantine. We need to find out if it's spreading in schools and whether it's safe in schools.
So they're not writing us with this program.
That's correct. They have to agree to bring the child to school. They have to agree to quarantine them. I gave them a whole list of things on the permission form that they have to agree to. But hopefully that will keep them in school, which is the important one. And I know they have to give up some other things, but trying to keep the focus on the academic portion and what is most important, getting them there in school. It is a provision that's been added just for school attendance. It's available to our staff as well, but to my knowledge, I don't know that any companies or anything are doing that. I'm not sure.
So this is a choice for families. I want families that understand this is a choice.
It's a choice, absolutely.
They're not doing this at all.
They're still quarantining. It's just a special provision to the quarantine. And the test is not intrusive. Now, I'm a grown man. I've got a large face. So, the swab was not at all painful or even uncomfortable. It was more ticklish. The smaller noses could be just a little bit tighter, a little bit more uncomfortable, but it's not the kind where you see where it looks like they're aiming and going straight for the brain cavity. It's a very comfortable test. It's the fast 10-minute version.
Are they taking these tests at home or are they?
I take them to school, the nurses take care of
They
that.
come in first day or first thing in the morning.
And there's no cost to it, so.
There is a positive base, it's just more.
Correct. They detect it, and then the program ends, and they have to go into their 10-day protocol of quarantine.
They're positive, and they're with the nurse.
Well, the nurses wear the protective equipment.
Yeah, but, then they still have to take the test to confirm that they also.
Only if they be considered close contact. But they typically wear the gowns, the shields, the face masks, like what you would see in the hospital when they're testing kids. That's what they, we've run multiple test clinics. We got a couple more running this week. And Healthy Kids has been really great about setting those up. So we have a lot of quarantines in the school, and they'll wait 5 days and they'll set up a clinic so parents can come and get that 5th day test. Get it effectively, then if they got that negative test, and all they gotta do is wait those extra days, and then they can come right back to school. So they'll continue to do that as well. This is not going to go away just because we have this. Is just another option.
I just have concern because swabbing kids' nose for 5 days, every 5 days, every day. It's just, I understand what you're saying, I really do. I just have concern. As a parent, I do have concern.
I signed the form for both my kids who are under the age. So I've got a 13-year-old who is vaccinated, and so this program wouldn't really apply to him because he wouldn't have to quarantine unless he were symptomatic.
Right.
But for my 9-year-old and my 5-year-old, I had no issues with signing this form. All 3 of my kids were tested in the early days where, they did go further back, and all of them handled it like champs. And so I myself have been more recently tested, and like Tim said, there's much less discomfort. It's similar to a flu swab, which isn't fun, but it is not tickle your brain kind of thing. And so again, I think it's important to stress as many times as possible that this is an option, and if families don't want to participate in this option, that is fine. But I myself, as a parent of 3, have submitted my permission slips for the 2 physicians.
And with the vaccinated people, even though we would not have to quarantine, we're vaccinated. They do strongly recommend that you get a test 3 to 5 days after exposure, because this particular variant is noted for its breakthrough cases. So you want to make sure that you're not going to spread around as well. And that's so even if you're vaccinated, you're still not out of the woods. You should still seek a test if you've been exposed. So we give all that information out to the parents when we identify. So, any other questions? And I'm available all the time. I answer questions daily. Anybody wants to call me and ask me questions, I'm happy to speak with them about it. And most people really do a very good job of trying to understand and provide good feedback. And we've gotten a lot of good calls, and a lot of support, and a lot of people who actually help steer us in different directions. So it's becoming a very cooperative environment, and I like that because I'm not a doctor.
I appreciate it. I do.
Thank you, Tina. Thank you very much. Okay, the next item on the agenda is item 4D, which is the finance report from Mr. Spalding.
Okay, looking at the month of July, you'll notice the beginning balance for July 2021 is italicized at 6.3 million. That's the number we keep going out. It's not to the penny yet, as we're continuing going through the audit process. So that will change to a permanent number. I still feel comfortable with that 6.3, and hopefully be a little bit north of that, but that is where we are. Comparing July 2021 to July 2020 with the receipts, the biggest one you're going to notice there, we don't have much property or vehicle at all. That's just a timing issue of receipts. Utility tax is a good one this year, but that's kind of catching up. Last year we were behind due to COVID on getting receipts payments, so we're back where we could be and should be there. Seats, you'll notice is down just a little bit, $2,500, and then the Medicaid reimbursement is just the timing. We got received notification yesterday that payment's coming for the quarter. We got it last year in July, what we get this year. It's the quarter things at the 3-month cycle, so it's just a timing issue. Scrolling on down to the expenditure side, you're gonna see some unfavorables, and I'll go and say this is the first month of this fiscal year we're looking at. I anticipate this is going to be normal this year because our last year comparables were a lot off because of COVID. We went to school a lot, so we didn't have expenses and things going on that route. So instruction, while it's down 93,000 to 196%, a lot of that had summer programs this year, but we didn't have summer programs last year, and also the rates that was getting. Okay, so these are some large percentage numbers, but there's some, I think, some justification why. The student support services and instructional support services are two biggies. Going back and look at that, there were some expenses to the general fund in July of last year that were later transferred over to COVID, the CARES fund to pick it up for some medical supplies and also some Chromebook expenditures. So those, I think in October, so we'll see those go down a little bit, go away. Looking at the 2300 district administrative support, we have already had some coding due to some KISTIP refund a few years ago. It might have been involved in KISTIP buyout. That used to be our insurance carrier years ago when we had to pay a buyout to get out of that. And there's a court order, we got some money back. So that's a matter of getting money back and turning it where it goes. And then the other big one there is 2,700 student transportation for the month of July, which is a good thing. We had two driver employees getting trained this year, whereas last year we weren't allowed to do that. So we did have people going through it, so we had expense of that. Then the last one has a variance of 42%. It's only $331. So it's not a large number, but it's a big difference. So our receipts are up 142,000 over the month of last year, and our expenses are actually up. We anticipate they'll be up about 63,000. So we're actually ending the month of 78,000 ahead this year than we did last year. Any questions on the month of July?
Okay, moving on to item 5 in the agenda, and I need a motion on item 5A.
I make a motion to consider approval of Jim Eubanks' resignation as a board member.
I just wanted to say thank you to Jim. I remember, the first time that I was kind of acquainted with Jim, he attended our public forum that we held at Floral Hall. Feels like forever ago at this point. And so he spoke very eloquently and very much in support of kind of his family and what our district facilities plan, what the impact that it would have on them. And so I sincerely appreciate Jim's willingness to speak at that forum and then continue to be an advocate for children in the district. And so, Jim, we thank you for your service. We will absolutely miss you. Wish you well in your new home with your family. And anybody else?
I appreciate everything that you did. I'm glad to get to know you for myself.
Thank you.
Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Need a motion on item 6A.
Make a motion to consider approval of field trips.
Mr. Benningfield, would you like to speak to those?
Sure, just a reminder, board, that we are reminding principals and teachers who are requesting field trips from saying a couple of things. Number one, the refund policy on anything where there's a money transaction. Some of those trips probably on this agenda are long range. I think there are some spring trips in the pipeline. So we hope that things are okay then. But when you get into some of those you're looking at, those are hotel accommodations. Some of those things have registration fees. If you remember, we had a very difficult time with one of our school field trips on the first round of the pandemic to Washington, D.C., and that group was not able to get all of their money back. So I just want you to be aware that when everybody requests a field trip, they are being reminded that they need to make sure what they can get back, what they can't, and when their last moment is before they can cancel without losing something significant, okay? We want everybody to get to still go and do and have a normal year, but we understand we have to address the business side of it too. Just want to make you aware of that, okay?
I think as all 3 of these trips are out of state, I think it's important for the sponsors to remember not only the things that Mr. Benningfield has stressed, but they also need to stay aware of any COVID-related protocols that are happening in those other states and how that might impact their trip as well. Any other questions on those? Okay, all in favor? Aye. I need a motion on item 6B.
Make a motion, we approve the revised 2021-22 salary schedule with an attachment.
I'll second.
Scott, you wanna just
So,
remind everybody what this is?
an unintentional consequence of the additional pay raise back in August. Our instructional assistants, substitutes are paid off of level 0. And when we did this, pay increase, our substitute instructional assistants were actually making more than our substitute teachers. So, well, we increased that to correct. And this is only adjusting substitute teachers, is the only position getting changed in this. This is just make it reflective of more than instructional assistant substitute.
Other questions? All in favor? Aye. I need a motion on item 6C. I'll make this one. I move that we consider approval to adopt a tax rate of 59 cents on real and personal property and 56.2 cents on motor vehicles. Any questions on this? All in favor? Aye. I need a motion on item 6D.
Consider approval for fiscal year 21-22 working budget.
So I provided y'all last week a hard copy of this, so 70-some pages long. I don't know every bit of it, the summary of it. Top there, you'll see back in May, the board approved the tentative budget, and there's comparables next to it on the working budget. And even though we've given a raise out, we anticipated it would be close to $1 million across all funds. What I did after the August board meeting is I actually went by employee and actually poured in. So the May tentative budget was based off projections, a lot of guesses, a lot of variables. Who's going to be here next year? Who's not going to retire? Things of that nature. So what I did after the fact is went back by individual employee, and they're in different codes depending on what school or department they may work in, and I actually put the actuals in. If we took a little time, but I feel more comfortable that our salaries are more in line to actuals instead of projections. In May, we got our contract with Cumberland for the nurses and nurse practitioners, 56,000 and 60,000. Still great, but we include that $4,000. We knew that. We were fortunate enough, thanks to Ms. Badgett and her staff, there's some funds that are considered flex focus funds in the state of Kentucky that you kind of move money in between. One of them was ESS. Last year, we could do a lot of ESS due to COVID and online instruction. So she oversees that program, and she graciously agreed to move some of that money over to preschool. So that in turn helped put some money to our flex focus, our grant funds for preschool, and not take as much out of our general fund to cover those additional costs. So that helped that as well. Any other grants that we can go staff to out of general fund, move over the grants, we've done that. The biggie on SEEK this year is we're still at the 4,000, and we're going to stay on the road like we talked about it. 2964 run with, but this year it also includes all day kindergarten. As of right now, that verbiage says for this school year. I think there's an intent for that to go moving forward, go all the time. But for once, in the past, it always got half-day kindergarten funding. This year, that SEEK number includes all day. Now, I do think with the increase in property tax revenue goes up, your SEEK goes down. So I'm hoping that we're going to not lose as much with the all-day kindergarten coming in, so kind of offset that shortfall. You all do approve we allow each school based on their site-based projection, $100 is what we had to require to allow them for supplies. And this board, many years ago, continues to do is funded at $110 per student. So the schools have a little bit more money to do some stuff in their schools they want to do with. So that is reflected in here. We kept diesel $250,000. We'll see. We'll monitor it as the year goes on. That's one way to keep. Capital outlay is money that is meant for construction, and you can transfer it to cover some costs. We did not do that. Obviously, we have a lot of projects going on, so that is there's no capital outlay money in the general fund. And we did, after having some talks with the county clerk's office, Mr. Chapman, we did increase the expected revenue from our motor vehicle tax. A couple things this does not include There's a thing called indirect costs, is you're allowed to charge grants. We've not done it this district in the past, because what an indirect cost is, it's, you can charge a grant percentage to do some management side of things, making their payroll, making their vendor payments, things like that. Well, if they come up short and we take it and transfer the money from their grant to the general fund, guess they'll come back and ask for some additional funds when they come up short of the grant. We've not done that, but we're going to do that in our ESSER 30. It's such a large amount of money. That'll help put the funds in the general fund. And as well, we'll look at doing the food services to have a healthy balance with it. And then we talked earlier, not too long ago, about Maker's Mark and the in lieu of. We really don't know what that number is, so I kept that number the same, but I do think we'll have some increased revenues off of additional barrels going in those in lieu of our beef barrel warehouses. So I feel comfortable, and I think this number will continue to go up. So we have a 6.1 there, I think it's going to be 6.3, so I think we're going to start with an additional 200,000 on top of this, plus some additional revenue. So I feel, we're taught to conservatively on the revenues and high on the expenses, just to have a best case scenario. So this is kind of what it's doing, but we are getting more and more toward the accuracy of the real number versus projection, especially with salary being 80% of our budget. So we have actuals in this. Yes, ma'am.
I'm pulling money out of ESSERs and food service. Like, what are you talking as far as?
It's a percentage that state calculates, and they tell us we can. So it's for, like I said, indirect costs, which include things like payroll, paying their accounts payable, their vendor bills, stuff like that. It's a way to put money into the general fund. It's an actual revenue stream to the general fund.
So we'll be talking more in the future on this.
Correct. So what I think, especially with ESSER, it's going to be hard to do is, as we get into, that ESSER 3 part of money we're talking about doing today, it's out there until 2024. So we haven't even got into it yet. So I hate to project how much it's going to be, because I think it'll be more in 2 or 3 years from now than it is going to be this year. As more we get into that funds, the more we charge off.
I'd like to know more about that. Okay.
And we'll work on that more too. Let's do a lot of us. We just haven't done that in the past because it didn't make sense on a smaller grant. Because they come up short, then they come back and utilize the money. So now that we have a larger grant, it does make sense to do it. Any other questions? Thank you.
Okay, so all in favor on item 6D? Aye. I need a motion on item 6E.
I make a motion to consider approval of PG 5 for the Marion County Middle School, PG 19-163.
Okay.
This is just project closure form, right?
That's correct. So we did a VG board prior, was lost on, close out the construction side of it. This actually closes out our project. The good news is we came in, the project came in $86,000 less than we anticipated. And then we also had some, about $4,000 left in some revenue. So we had about $90,000 left in this project. We could put towards something else in the future.
Other questions? All in favor?
Aye.
On item 6F, been made aware that we don't actually have the donor contract in hand. And so we're going to table that one until we do. Need a motion on item 6G.
I'll make a motion to consider approval of CMTA letter of intent for guaranteed energy savings project.
So the last project, or last meeting, y'all decided to address the HVAC at Livestock and Western Elementary School via a performance contract. What method of delivery, but goes back and forth and chose performance contract. This is the opportunity how we can do it. They're on a bid list, so we're going to utilize the Kentucky Purchasing Co-op bid list. So this is a letter of intent to KDE to participate in that program that's allowed us.
All in favor? Aye. I need a motion on item 6H.
Motion to approve the initial BG1 for guaranteed energy savings contract.
Questions on this? Comments?
So that is the actual project itself. We're identifying a $3.5 million project initial, like we talked about previously. That gives us the go ahead to start that process of application to Department of Education to start the performance contract for the building claims getting city license. And then will be paid out of the extra funds.
Right.
Are we with roster on this? Well,
No, it's just with the CSBA Energy Solutions that the Kentucky Purchasing Co-op, we did one back in 2015 with them.
Okay.
And they're one of the, about a 20-year warranty that we're not picking the energy savings, they make a difference.
All in favor? Aye. I need a motion on item 6I. I'll make a motion to consider approval of the revised BG1 for the Marion County High School renovation and addition, BG number 21-103. Scott.
let's change something.
So, one, chime in on the.
Sure, yeah, so this is required because of the updated BG3 that you all put on the agenda for the approved construction documents. When the construction estimate is 10% over or underneath the original BG1 amount, you have to go through this revised process. So this is just kind of updating the original BG1 numbers to be reflective of where the project is currently.
Total cost is 18 million. That's the project cost, so you're 15.9 in construction and all your additional fees, like the total project cost $18,422,000 for high school project.
So this is just revising the BG1 that we passed back.
Correct, this is updated.
Other questions on this one? All in favor? Aye. I need a motion on item 6J.
Consider approval of construction documents submittal and update BG3 for the Marion County High School renovation and addition. -103.
Want to tell us a little bit, because we've had quite a few questions about what's going on at the high school with the renovation project, and so if you just want to walk us through some things, that'd be great.
Certainly. So just overall, the documents, the design that we presented at DD's last time I was here, it's been pretty much more just a refinement of that. So there's been no big changes in terms of the scope or the layout of classrooms or other kind of associated spaces. We've just continued to work refining those, getting them ready for construction level documentation to put out to bid in the fall.
How far are we out for this? Would be putting out the problem?
Yes, it would. So we're projecting hopefully in the middle of October to be able to do that, pending approval.
How long is that open? How long is the process of work?
It'll be there for about a month, maybe a little less than a month, but around 3 or 4 weeks.
So they will before this board would be approving it.
Yes, sir. I think tentatively scheduled to hopefully catch you all right before Christmas to come back with our recommendation. Next up there with your approval, we kind of go through then kind of finalizing contracts and take care of all the paperwork. And then hopefully in the early 22, hopefully we'll start having some fences up and progress starting.
We students in school probably start.
Yes, we're working very much so with Scott, Michael, and Mr. Peterson, and Mr. Flosser, and other input to kind of devise a thought-through phasing plan to make sure we're going to have a way to kind of make sure everything's going to be working and functioning during the school year.
I think people will be really great to start seeing us some dirt move. It's school work on.
Great to hear.
And just to clarify, repair and replacement of the roof at the high school is part of this $15.9 million renovation, correct?
Correct. The entire roof minus the Roby dome. We're taking it down to deck, new insulation, new roof system, fixing some of the ongoing issues. So it'll be brand new roof.
Perfect. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Okay. All in favor on item 6J? Aye. I need a motion on item 6K.
Make a motion to consider approval to award site survey recommendation to SME or SME with a lump sum of $15,684.50 for the Lebanon Elementary School.
Second.
I had a quick question from one of the constituents. Asbestos, is this included, the bid that we got going on? Are we removing all asbestos out of that building?
So this actually is just for the actual property itself. This doesn't do anything to the inside of the school itself.
Right, but
But moving forward, yes, we will certainly be required to remove or abate any asbestos we find.
Okay.
We'll contact Scott and consider the existing surveys, so.
okay, so I may have asked that before, but I just wanted to verify it so that they're aware of it. Okay, great.
All in favor?
Aye.
I need a motion on item 6L.
But I will consider the award site surveyor recommendation for Calvary Elementary, SNME, and for $38,595.75. If my vision held up here.
I'll say.
Any questions on this one? Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
I need a motion on item 6M.
Make a motion to consider acceptance of Marion County High School combi oven bids. Attachment.
I'll second.
You got that.
We just have to accept it right now. Any questions on this one? All in favor? Aye. I need a motion on item 6N. I'll make a motion, we consider acceptance of the MCHS combi oven, wait a minute, I'm on the wrong one. Let's award the bid for the MCHS combi oven to Douglas Equipment.
Second.
Would you like to talk about that a little bit, please? I had some questions on that. I know that there was an attachment here that said that Douglas did not actually come out to the site and inspect it. And so I'm thinking, for me, I'm looking at, they didn't come out to see what actually needed. And so, would you like to talk about that a little bit for us?
So something I learned very early on, I always put on my bids, to have the contractor or the bidders come to the site and do an inspection. Where there had been some equipment purchased by the previous director that when it was delivered, wouldn't fit through the doors because they didn't do a site inspection. So we got into a whole issue of having to send it back. So that's just something I've learned, that you always put that on there. So in C&T Design site inspection, they looked at the electrical. If you look, the amp voltage on the two combis bid is different. They actually looked at that, made sure it was going to be the right thing. They also noticed in the site inspection and walkthrough with me, we don't have hood coverage to cover another combi in there. That's not going to nullify warranty on the combi in there. So the fix for that is you can buy one that attaches to it. So he's got that included in that bid. That's not something I asked for in the bid. That's included on there. So really and truly, I think by the time you get all the stuff added on that he found in his site inspection, there's some electrical work that'll have to be done. That Douglas bid is much lower, but it doesn't include all of those things.
So would your recommendation then to be to go with C&T?
My recommendation would be C&T, yes.
I'll rescind some of this. And then make a new one to consider approval to award the bid for the Marion County High School combi oven to C&T Design.
And also, it was the one that's replacing is a 480 three-phase. It's replacing the same one instead of a 240. So,
Other questions or comments on
Yeah.
we want it done right.
for sure? All in favor?
Aye.
I need a motion on item 6O.
I'll make a motion to consider acceptance of bids for Marion County High School cafe furniture to be paid by Fund 51. This is for-
I'll second that.
This is for furniture.
Okay.
Jennifer, any information on that one that you'd like to share?
That's a project we went back and forth on and talked about a couple of years. We've had a couple different companies come in, look at that and draw out, and we've actually got some pretty cool looking designs that they've drawn out for us. Mr. B and I sat and met with them, and Mr. Spalding was in there, Mr. Peterson. It's gonna look really neat. We're trying to take that cafeteria looking more like a secondary cafeteria rather than that institutional 1970 something look that we got going on right now.
What, that doesn't make kids hungry?
First class all the way.
Including first class garbage cans.
Okay, all right. Any other questions on this one? Okay, all in favor? Aye. I need a motion on item 6P.
I make a motion to consider approval to award the bid for Marion County High School cafeteria furniture to paid by Fund 51 to C&T Designs for $102,850.
I'll second.
All in favor?
Aye.
I need a motion on item 7.
Student learning.
I'll make a motion to consider approval of all consent agenda items 7A through F. Any questions there? Okay. All in favor?
Aye.
Item 8 is acknowledgement of personnel actions, so acknowledged. Then item 9 is executive session per KRS 61.8101C and KRS 61.8101F of the Kentucky Open Meetings Act for discussion of pending litigation and discussion of appointment, discipline, or dismissal of individual employee. And so at this point, we'll go into executive session. Although I think this is very still on it. Yes, I'll make the motion.
And I will say.
All in favor?
Aye. So see, you'll let us know.
Yeah, it should be. I anticipated that it would take us longer than it did.